Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome. I'm Don Elliman, president of Sports Illustrated. It's my great pleasure and truly an honor to have you join us here tonight as we celebrate 40 years of Sports Illustrated.
Tonight, we also celebrate the 40 people we feel have been most responsible for shaping those 4 decades. I'm Mark Mulvoy, Sports Illustrated's managing editor, and it's because of remarkable achievements like those of our honored guests that Sports Illustrated has grown to become America's sports storyteller. This evening, we'll look at how we got to that place and where we're going.
Tonight, we are in a sense messengers, speaking for all the people who make and have made Sports Illustrated a permanent fixture in the wonderful world of sport. And that message is one of great pride.
Today, the name Sports Illustrated has broadened to include a successful spin-off magazine, Sports Illustrated for Kids, as well as forays into television, new media, and soon, the information highway. But the core of this business is, and always will be, the magazine itself, launched on the vision and the dedication of a handful of people back in the summer of 1954.
Much has changed since that summer. America, the world, and the world of sports. So has Sports Illustrated. Today, SI is more vital and vibrant, relevant and innovative than ever before. But there's something that hasn't changed in 40 years, and that is the very special relationship that this magazine has with our readers.
Sports are an important part of their lives, and it is in Sports Illustrated that they immerse themselves in the world they most enjoy. It is that lifelong passion for sports and their special rapport with Sports Illustrated that we'd like to share with you now.
The day I whistled my first line drive down the third baseline, I began to dream secret dreams. I was Willie Mays hitting the long ball, Ted Williams sending a shot into the bleachers, Mickey Mantle knocking one out of the stadium. As I got older, those dreams remained just as vivid. And today, I still find myself imagining what might be. I was 11 years old in the summer of 1954, and my secret dream was to play in the big leagues. I'd play baseball for hours until the ball got lost in the night sky. It was then that I began surrounding myself with sport and getting as close as I could to the athletes and games that would shape my life. I literally grew up with Sports Illustrated, and I suppose that's why I feel a sense of kinship with the magazine. When something's been a part of you since youth, you tend to value it more as you get older. Reading Sports Illustrated made me feel grown up. I loved when my dad would talk with me about it and ask me questions. Say, did you read about Johnny Padres? Did you know his father was a great pitcher too? But often with a turn of a page, he'd lose me. I wasn't nearly as interested in which flies to use when trout fishing, or what hunting dog was most likely to retrieve a pheasant. He even read the stories about bridge. But there was always something else to share. Always a story that would take my dad and I through a time we'll never forget. Rocky Marciano retiring undefeated, Don Larson pitching a perfect World Series game, and the 1958 sudden death duel between the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants. SI called it the best game ever played. Looking back, I'd say they were right. As that decade drew to a close, the walls of my room became more and more cluttered with my various heroes of the week. The last thing I saw at night and the first thing I saw in the morning were the images of the athletes I wished I could be.
Here's a swing and a high fly ball going deep to left. That's they do it. Over the red home run, the Pirates win.
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about a science book. Don't know much about the French I took. But I do know 1 and 1 is 2. And if this one could be with you, for the wonderful world this would be. La ta ta. ta-ta. History. Biology. Yeah, but I do know that I love you. And I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world.
How do you recover when a dream fades away? Eventually, life resumes its pace. But things are never quite the same. In growing up, I had to leave some of my own dreams behind. I was hitting close to 400 in my sophomore year of college when an inside fastball shattered my elbow and my dreams of a major league career. Still, sports were very much a part of my life. Sports Illustrated was my insider's guide, wrestling with sports and society and moral issues as often as I did. The defiance when Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali and refused to join the armed forces. The brashness and the arrogance when Joe Namath guaranteed the Jets' Super Bowl victory. SI covered it all, made sense of it all, and forced you to take notice, not with flashy headlines, but by raising serious questions all its own. Social issues jumped from the pages. Racism, what it's like to be a minority in organized sport, the environment, who's harming it and who's saving it, drug abuse, how it's destroying our athletes. Always, there was a writer who made these stories important, a voice I just couldn't ignore. But the turbulence of that time couldn't obscure the big names that emerged. Coach Vince Lombardi and his winning is everything philosophy. Havlicek, Cousy, and the Celtics dominating the NBA. Bob Beamon jumping farther than any human being ever had before. These were the memories I held on to. But the stories didn't cover my walls anymore. My wife, who I'd married for her love of sports first and me second, thought they'd be better decorated with something else. New images that represented 1,000 dreams for the future. Pictures of our son.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Well, I'm not a crook.
Teach me to hit, Dad. Teach me to hit it really far. That's how he'd welcome me home every day, my son, with the wiffle bat 2 inches taller than he was. And so our evening ritual began. I know I got more out of those early coaching sessions than he did. Baseball, Little League, and Major League still had a strong influence on me. So did SI. I found myself reading it as if it were a favorite book, savoring the stories, and always wishing there were more. Some left quite an impact on me, simply by capturing a moment and preserving a memory. Like Hank Aaron hitting his 715th home run, or Muhammad Ali backing up his boasts of being the greatest. Who knew that in a few short years Ali would lose his title to a guy featured on one of SI's scariest covers ever? Something else was happening in sports, something important. Women were emerging onto the scene, and Billie Jean King's defeat of Bobby Riggs led the way. Suddenly, my wife took even more of an interest in Sports Illustrated, sharing the stories of accomplished female athletes with our daughter, who wanted to be a gymnast one day, a figure skater the next, and a jockey after that. One day she picked up a tennis racket, and I thought, maybe the next Chris Evert. Though many changes were taking place, I truly felt that this era in sport was my time, convinced that there would never be another like it. There'd never be another racehorse as spectacular as Secretariat. No team would ever light up the league like the undefeated Miami Dolphins. No coach could ever be as dignified and proud as John Wooden. Then I'd see my kids experiencing the powerful emotions that sport brings out and the competitive instincts that would drive them to do their best. Their passion for sport would shape their lives, as it had mine. A true sportsman should always admit his weaknesses. So, in my struggle to maintain some dignity on the golf course, I went to the one person I knew who could help my game immensely, my son. Teach me how to hit it, I'd say. Teach me how to hit it really far. I was mixing sport with business whenever possible. In the 80s, sports was big business, loaded with athlete endorsements and high-priced looks and styles. Even SI looked slicker, but never seemed to lose sight of what was important and meaningful in the world of sports. In our family, the Olympics meant we could all agree on what channel to watch. As usual, we asked a lot of the games. Show us miracles. Show us athletes who defy the odds. Mary Lou Retton nailing her vault and winning the gold. Carl Lewis racing to glory. The men's swim team, hands over their hearts, singing the national anthem. So many lingering images, powerful moments, retold in Sports Illustrated in stories that often made me smile, and I'm not ashamed to say, sometimes made me cry. I recall it as a time of rising stars and fallen heroes, and often the stories that unfolded before me were ones I didn't want to know about, because they shattered an image or disgraced a game. But I think SI is at its best when it comes to telling these stories and getting to the truth. Remarkable feats continued to transcend the moments. Doug Flutie's game-winning Hail Mary pass, Walter Payton breaking Jim Brown's rushing record, and Jack Nicklaus's triumph in Augusta winning his 6th green jacket. Watching him, I could almost feel the pride he felt. But that's something sport had always given me. You don't have to be the one crossing the finish line to feel the thrill of winning.
I'm on my way, I'm making it. So much larger than life.
I still hold on to magazines, boxes of Sports Illustrateds in my attic that for some reason I just can't seem to throw out. My kids, all grown up and out on their own, read the magazine now, and there's not a trout fishing story or a hunting dog feature to be found. What is there is big and bold and exciting, enough to keep me coming back for more. Because there will always be something to learn and new heroes to admire, just as there were 40 years ago when I was busy dreaming my dreams. And I see it in my kids' eyes when they read about an athlete who inspires them, a controversy that provokes them, a story that just reaches out and pulls them in. It's there on top of their minds, that elusive dream that had always followed me. If I try hard enough, someday, maybe, it could be me. And at that moment, I can see myself again clear as day. I'm 11 years old. I've just whistled my first line drive down the third baseline. I'm Willie Mays, Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle.
Without question, it's been quite a journey. And for anyone who may be wondering why we're celebrating 40 years of Sports Illustrated at the American Museum of Natural History, I offer this. Look around you. This gathering of legends and luminaries of the world of sports under one roof is nothing short of historical, perhaps the greatest collection of 20th century sports figures ever.
It's been kept a highly guarded secret, but we will reveal tonight SI's 40 for the ages. and pay tribute to their accomplishments. In fact, we've already acknowledged each one of them with a special gift, a steel and 18-karat gold Rolex chronometer specially inscribed for the occasion. We hope it will always serve as a reminder of their place in SI's history. Now, there are a few brief introductions we'd like to make. At the risk of offending some or all of the VIPs here tonight, I'm going to do the only smart thing I can and introduce my bosses. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman and CEO of Time Warner, Jerry Levin. The Chairman of Time Inc. Magazines, Reg Brock. The President and CEO of Time Inc. Magazines, Don Logan.
And I'd like to introduce my boss, the editor-in-chief of Time Inc. Magazines, Jason McManus. We're also pleased that a number of former Sports Illustrated managing editors and publishers could be here with us tonight. Their contributions and creativity throughout the last 4 decades helped shape Sports Illustrated into what it has become today. But there is one former member of our masthead we'd like to give special recognition to tonight, and that is the man who was the founding managing editor of Sports Illustrated and later its publisher, a man who spent 40 years in the Time Inc. organization. Ladies and gentlemen, from California, Mr. Sid James.
All of these fine folks will be available for autographs after the dinner. Anyway, we'll be covering a lot of ground tonight, and we'd be remiss to look back on 4 decades of SI without mentioning one subject that occasionally draws a few controversies, our swimsuit issue, especially since 2 of our former swimsuit cover models have joined us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, the 1991 cover girl, Ashley Richardson. And our 3-time cover model and one of America's favorites, Cheryl Tiegs. You're both a big part of our past, and we're awfully glad you could be here to celebrate with us tonight. Now, shifting to the very near future, as in tomorrow night, Sports Illustrated's 40th anniversary television special, 40 for the Ages, will air tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC. We are thrilled to have the gentleman who is hosting that show act as our stage anchor tonight. He's a 5-time Emmy Award winner and has been honored as Sportscaster of the Year by the National Sports Writers and Sportscasters Association, also 5 times. He anchored 86 hours of primetime Olympic coverage from Barcelona in 1992, and he's set to take on that task in Atlanta again in 1996. Tonight, he's strictly doing time travel, taking us from 1954 through 1994, and offering us his unique insight and wisdom along the way. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Costas.
Don, Mark, thank you very much. My role at this juncture will be very brief. We'll let you enjoy dinner and then come back with what we are sure will be a very enjoyable program and a chance to acknowledge individually all the people, and a majority of the 40 who were honored as the 40 for the Ages were able to be here tonight, and we'll get to meet them a bit later. But a word about the program tomorrow night. It's one of the finest programs of its kind that I've ever been involved with. Ted Shaker, Alan Wiseman, Paulette Douglas, Bruce Kornblatt, and all of whom are here tonight did a wonderful job in putting the program together, and I know you'll enjoy it, but I also know you will argue about it, not just tomorrow night, but probably in the office and in the carpool and wherever else for weeks afterward. Just this afternoon, I happened to flip on WFAN because I had to hear what Vinny from Bayonne thought today about the baseball strike, and I was surprised to hear Mike and the Mad Dog, somehow they had gotten a copy of the list, which is embargoed until tomorrow morning, and they were arguing like crazy about who was on and who was off the list. And finally, at 6 o'clock, they put out a plea to callers to stop bombarding the station switchboard with their disagreements and their suggestions, because the switchboard was about to explode and the faxes were coming in. And that, I guess, is part of the fun of this, there are some people who were excluded that led to outrage. As a matter of fact, I have to apologize to you for the disturbance which many of you may have noticed outside in the lobby as Willie, Mickey, Wilt, and Kareem were hustled off by security trying to sneak in without a ticket. A pathetic situation. But we'll run down the entire list of 40 after dinner. For now, we invite you to relax and enjoy your meal, and we'll see you in a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening once again, and we are just a few moments away from revealing the full list of 40, and at that point, let the arguments begin, not only about the inclusions and the exclusions, but about the order in which they were placed. It was a great honor for me to be asked to host the program, which airs tomorrow night, and to be part of this evening. I guess all of us have read Sports Illustrated through the years. I remember my first subscription. I was about 12 years old, and Jim Ryan was on the cover as the Sportsman of the Year, and it was underneath the Christmas tree, and I guess at that point is when I became a regular reader. And I think what you're going to see tonight, part of what you saw in the opening piece, what you'll see in the list of 40, you'll see it reflected in the program tomorrow night, is the texture of Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated has always been able to celebrate sports, to capture the drama, the sheer beauty, the exhilaration, the fun, the quirkiness of it, but at the same time, balance it with a healthy dose of perspective and journalism and a look at what makes sports important and lasting beyond the moment. And that affected the selection of the people on the list. That selection committee, as it were, was headed by Mark Mulvoy. For many of the years that all of us have been reading Sports Illustrated, he's the guy who's been at the helm, and no one can argue that the magazine hasn't flourished under his watchful eye. His latest vision, Sports Illustrated's 40th anniversary issue, 40 for the Ages, hits newsstands all over America tomorrow. But tonight, he's here to tell us how a simple idea became one of the magazine's most ambitious undertakings ever. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Mulvoy.
Thank you, Bob. We thought it was very important that we do something special to honor 40 years of Sports Illustrated, and at the same time come up with a way to involve all the writers and all the editors, the people who bring Sports Illustrated to life week after week. So really, 40 for the Ages started out as a simple question put to the SI edit staff. What sports figures would you say had the most impact on sports over the last 40 years? You can probably imagine the diversity of the responses we received, everyone from Ben Johnson to Jimmy Johnson to Rayford Johnson. But gradually, after combing all the lists, we wound up with about 130 names. Taking it down to 40 was the really fun part. But between all the arguing, the heated debates, the books being thrown across the room, a list emerged that somehow made sense. And while we're still not ready to tell you everyone who's on it, you'll see that in a moment, we can tell you that the person who is number one has been number one since day one. That never changed. And in keeping with our role as the conscience of sport, a few names on the list are as necessary as they are unexpected. They aren't household names, but they represent extremely important areas of sport and need to be included. Lastly, you all know by now that it wouldn't be SI if we didn't give you something to argue about. To that end, several of the names on the list have controversial aspects to their careers, but that wasn't enough to exclude them because their overall impact was just too strong. But first and foremost, what the list is what we wanted it to be all along, a memorable tribute to those people who have provided Sports Illustrated with its lifeblood, the drama, the achievements, the turbulence, the heroics. We wouldn't be here without them. So now we hand the list over to you to agree or disagree with, to recollect and to remember. Ladies and gentlemen, Sports Illustrated's 40 for the Ages.
stock car racing career. What's coming out? What a beautiful goal from Pele! El Rey Pele!
Bobby Orr behind the net for Sanderson. Bobby Orr! Orr for the Boston Bruins! Have won the Stanley Cup!
Watch this. Watch this. That's up right to the other bar.
Has that been done before?
Never. Not by any human that I know of.
Latest right fielder in the game of baseball, Roberto Clemente.
Has not been bashful this week. He's come down here to Miami, and he has said that the Jets are going to win. He doesn't even predict it. He said, I guarantee a Jet victory.
The Triple Crown winner. Here comes Secretary to the wire. An unbelievable, an amazing performance. He hits the finish 25 right in front.
Johnny Wooden close to the national championship. Here drives the corner. It's good. And comes Johnny Wooden, who's 27 years of coaching, winning his 10th national championship.
That's the new home run champion of all time. And it's 10 p.m. The fireworks are going. Let's listen to this crowd.
If there was ever splendor on this grass, it's too much of it.
And so the list is revealed. 40 who shaped sports. And I know what you're all saying. What? No Ray Handley? I'm sorry. Cannot fit everybody, but we are honored to have 26 of these compelling sports figures represented here tonight. And I have the great pleasure of introducing each of them to you right now. As I do, keep in mind that the words you're hearing, appropriately enough, are the words of Sports Illustrated's writers who have contributed to the 40 for the Ages special anniversary issue. His physical features helped set him apart: the hands, the long-stemmed build, the hair that ebbed and flowed with the prevailing fashion. His presence in basketball gave the sport one of its rarest figures, someone who embodied the most old-fashioned human virtues while performing the most futuristic, apparently inhuman feats. And while we'll always remember him for that spectacular under-the-basket and back-out-the-other-side shot in the 1980 NBA Finals, the essence of the man we call Dr. J will always be his personal grace. Ladies and gentlemen, Julius Erving. The doctor. The leagues he founded, the World Hockey Association, the World Football League, and the American Basketball Association, are usually recalled as comical and garish, best symbolized by tricolored basketballs and royal blue hockey pucks. But Gary Davidson has contributed much more that is lasting. The talents of Wayne Gretzky and Julius Erving, the goalposts in the back of the end zone, the three-point shot. Perhaps most importantly, he placed franchises in cities that weren't considered major league, places like Winnipeg and San Antonio, Edmonton, and Indianapolis. Gary Davidson bowed out of professional sports some 20 years ago, but his ideas live on. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Davidson. The bad news is that Gary's new leagues never surpassed the established leagues. The good news is he had absolutely nothing to do with rotisserie leagues, and for that we can thank him. He shone most brilliantly from 1986 until 1990, winning the Tour de France all 3 times he entered, the first American ever to win that race. Greg LeMond was both a path and a light, extending the sport's popularity beyond its European borders and inspiring countrymen to emulate him. Before LeMond, Americans thought of bikes as something you straddle to deliver the newspaper. A true competitor and Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year in 1989, Greg LeMond. Willis Reed, Joan Benoit, Mary Lou Retton all can attest to the miracle of arthroscopic surgery. All competed in their sports within days of having that procedure done. One man is responsible for bringing this surgical technique to American sports. One man saw how it worked in Japan and made it his mission to learn it and apply it to sports medicine. Today, arthroscopic surgery is reported to the point that it's now hard to recall when it wasn't available. In fact, many of us here tonight have probably been scoped. And perhaps now we can all thank the man responsible for not leaving us with zipper scars all over our knees, Dr. Robert Jackson. He is a storm on the horizon as he approaches, a brass band on parade and a cable access preacher in the throes of revelation, and he is wind and rain and bluster. He was also the subject of an 8-page SI story in December of 1990 that was devoted entirely to the subject of his hair. In 1982, and 8 pages was not enough. In 1982, he was the promoter for 13 world champion boxers. In 1983, he staged 23 world championship bouts. He brought boxing heavily to the cable and pay-per-view markets, making millions in the process. A man who hasn't had his own franchise, he had his own sport. Don King. Don, just a touch of moose right at the top. When 19-year-old Peggy Fleming glided into the adoring embrace of the American public by winning the gold medal at the 1968 Olympics in Grenoble, she launched figure skating's modern era. Ever since, certainly to North Americans, it's been the marquee sport of the Winter Games. No skater in any era could surpass Fleming's lyrical elegance on the ice. 26 years later, she remains the sport's artistic bellwether. Peggy Fleming. He was neither a doctor nor a great athlete. He was a popularizer with an uncanny sense of timing. The changes Jim Fixx wrought with the publication of the Complete Book of Running in 1977 were pretty close to revolutionary. Yes, the legs on the book's cover belonged to its author. In the end, Fixx taught us not how to make our lives longer, as it turned out, but how to make them better. Joining us tonight is Jim Fixx's son, John Fixx. He had the aura and the panache, the happy feet, the taste for malice when it was necessary, the fire served with a side of ice. But forget the pretty stuff and remember this. Sugar Ray Leonard was among the toughest, most resilient, and implacable warriors ever to pull on gloves. He was the first fighter to win titles in 5 divisions, everything from welter on up to light heavyweight. He was also the first non-heavyweight to earn $100 million. When Terry Norris clubbed him into retirement in 1991, a puffy-eyed Leonard said, "I am not of the 90s. No, he's not. He's for all time. SI's 1981 Sportsman of the Year, Sugar Ray Leonard. His nickname means nothing in any language, but evokes images of genius and gentility in them all. Pele began his professional career at 16, and a year later was an international icon. On October 1st, 1977, his mission in professional soccer ended. His last match was sold out 6 weeks beforehand, covered by 650 journalists, and broadcast in 38 nations. In a speech to 75,000 fans, Pele called the occasion the crowning moment of his life and urged his audience to pay attention to the children of the world. He hasn't forgotten his own promise, continuing to work for children's causes and for UNICEF. And he's here with us tonight. Pele. Sports junkies rejoice. 15 years ago, with those words, ESPN hit the airwaves, and sports television hasn't been the same since. Back then, SI predicted ESPN may become the biggest thing in TV sports since Monday Night Football and primetime World Series games. Prophetic words, to say the least. Today, ESPN brings sports into more than 60 million homes, 24 hours a day, and sports fans are still rejoicing. The man who created this $1 billion company and thus gave us games galore, Sports Center, and unleashed Mel Kiper and monster trucks on a nation, William Rasmussen. It was at the Daytona Speedway that he made himself a legend, winning twice as many NASCAR races, 200 of them, as anybody else ever has. Richard Petty revolutionized his sport, colonized his native South, and Simonized his opposition on Sundays. He didn't merely feel his race car around him, he began to look like it too. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Petty. It's good to see Richard Petty, a man who withstood the demands of speed, snap decisions, and ever-present danger, and that was just in the cab ride over here tonight. This next gentleman was the first black man to win the U.S. Open in 1968, the first to win Wimbledon in 1975, but his athletic talent was the least of his gifts. When he was named Sportsman of the Year in 1992, SI wrote, "If sportsmanship is also an athlete's ability to shift from being a selfish competitor to being a useful member of society, then Ash's sportsmanship is unequaled. His gradual harvest has grown into a mountain of good. Tonight, we honor the impact that Arthur Ashe's mountain has made, and we welcome his wife, Jeannie, who continues to keep Arthur's spirit alive." Ladies and gentlemen, Jeannie Ash. She was 85 pounds of pigtailed détente, flipping her way into the American consciousness. In winning 3 gold medals and a silver at the 1972 Summer Olympics, Olga Korbut put a different, more human face on her communist country and changed the sport of gymnastics forever. The woman who set the stage for Nadia and Mary Lou and thousands of other little girls with big dreams, Olga Korbut. He was a man of little more than ordinary size, but he wielded an improbably large bat and a profoundly important influence that is felt even today. Some 22 years after his plane carrying him on a humanistic mission plunged into the sea, no less an authority than Casey Stengel said Roberto Clemente was the best right fielder he'd ever seen. No less a pitcher than Sandy Koufax, when asked how to pitch to Clemente, said, "Roll the ball up there." His 3,000th hit would turn out to be his last, but his other dreams, such as building a sports city for the kids of Puerto Rico, well, they continue to thrive, thanks to the support of his family. We're proud to have with us tonight the son of baseball legend Roberto Clemente Jr. Few had his magnetism, and nobody was as big as long as he was, winning 323 games, still the major college football record. At Alabama, he developed 6 national champions and won more than 82% of his games. To this day, Paul Bear Bryant remains a folk hero in the South and the enduring symbol of his profession and his sport. Joining us tonight is the grandson of coaching great Bear Bryant, Mark Bryant Tyson. For 14 years as ABC's Monday Night Football broadcaster, Howard Cosell amused, amazed, irritated, outraged, and annoyed audiences. But mostly, he attracted them, building Monday night into something that was often bigger than the games themselves. In a famous poll conducted by TV Guide in the late 70s, he was voted simultaneously the most despised sportscaster in America and the most beloved. Howard couldn't be here tonight, but here to represent him and accept for him are his daughters Hillary and Jill and grandchildren Peyton and Colin. It was the plight of city kids that got Dr. Harold Gores thinking. He decided that if he couldn't actually make a tree grow in Brooklyn, well, he could at least get somebody to make him a counterfeit countryside. The end result was artificial turf, and it has since become an invention now more famous for its side benefits than its intended use. Upon his death last year, the New York Times noted Gore's contributions as an educator known for innovations. But in sports, he'll be remembered for his part in the development of all those year-round fields where grown men, if not the boys he meant to help, play indoors amid the fresh scent of nylon. Joining us this evening is the wife of the late Dr. Harold Gores, Helen Gores. University of Alabama head coach Bear Bryant called him the greatest athlete I have ever coached. And when he signed a pro contract with the New York Jets in 1965, Joe Namath found himself fulfilling a role never before played, that of the young wounded hero as cocky anti-establishment media beacon. He did his own thing. He was a bonus baby. He was Broadway Joe, guaranteeing the Jets would beat the Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III. And when the Jets stunned the Colts, Namath's status as mythical revolutionary was guaranteed. He peaked and faded fast, like most wounded heroes do. But the idea of him lives on. Broadway Joe, Joe Namath. There is one obvious difference between the next great competitor and all the others on the list, but there's something important he has in common with many of them. The standard to which all who followed would be held was set by him. It happened on June 9th, 1973, as Secretariat, with jockey Ron Turcotte aboard, plunged towards the far turn in the last leg of the Triple Crown. In the course of his 16-month racing career, the colt rose higher and faster and larger than any U.S. horse of modern times. When he took his final leap at the Belmont Stakes, the timer froze at 2 minutes, 24 seconds. 21 years later, it's frozen still as the record. Tonight, we're pleased to have with us the woman who owned Secretariat, Penny Tweedy. He's the only person to be enshrined twice in the College Basketball Hall of Fame, first as a player, then as a coach. Under his tutelage, UCLA won 10 NCAA championships, and they went 30-0 4 times. John Wooden turned players into champions and set an example for his profession, at the heart of which was his pyramid for success, used as a touchstone throughout his career. As one rival coach said, John was a better coach at 55 than he was at 50, and he was a better coach at 60 than at 55. He's a true example of a man who learned from day one to day last. Sports Illustrated's 1972 Sportsman of the Year, the Wizard of Westwood, John Wooden. He has been so good for so long, winning his 10th NHL scoring title this year and surpassing Gordie Howe's record for goals in a career, that it's easy, I guess, to forget how otherworldly the great one was in his prime. His signature moves, once his alone, are now commonly copied by the top centers of the game, although it's always a pale imitation. And hockey's newfound acceptance in the Sun Belt, long held to be a pipe dream, well, that's directly attributable to Wayne Gretzky, too. Always respectful of the men whose records he eclipsed, Gretzky has been a treasure in this often troubled sport for the past 15 years. When he leaves it, he'll be the man to which all others are compared. Sports Illustrated's 1982 Sportsman of the Year, the most popular 99 since Barbara Feldon, Wayne Gretzky. In 1960, He signed his first client, Arnold Palmer, and from that sturdy platform, Mark McCormick launched a business that would become a billion-dollar industry, forever changing the landscape of professional sports. He founded his company, the International Management Group, on the simple premise that corporations would pay a lot of money to have their names associated with great athletes. Today, virtually everything being done in the way of corporate sponsorship of athletic events, event management, merchandise licensing, and made-for-TV sports started with the man we recognize here tonight, Mark McCormick. Talk about a declaration of the obvious, especially in light of today's news. No one person in the past 40 years changed the very structure of baseball more than Marvin Miller. In 1966, when he began what would be his 17 undefeated and untied years as executive director of the Major League Baseball Players Association, he held one belief above all others, that a ball player should not be bound to one club for life. Having established for the players both purpose and freedom, he is the association's George Washington and Abraham Lincoln all in one. Today, he's 76 years old, but still vibrant and still available to the Players Association whenever it should ask for his wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, Marvin Miller. Tennis was her grand passion, but activism was her true calling, perhaps. Her 39 Grand Slam titles in singles and doubles were perhaps the least of her accomplishments, strange as that may sound. Billie Jean King wasn't happy unless she was fostering whole movements. Professionalism, feminism, there's little in the realm of sport for women that she didn't nurture, and she may not be done yet. Sports Illustrated Sportswoman of the Year in 1972, Billie Jean King. Wide world of sports, Monday Night Football, the Olympic Games. In his 33 years with ABC Sports, Roone Arledge made each of these titles icons of sports television. Television itself is largely responsible for making sports the global and moneyed enterprise it has become. And Roone Arledge is largely responsible for making sports on television look and sound and succeed the way they do. Today, the Arledge legacy continues to loom large over what we watch, as his day job is now president of ABC News exclusively. Ladies and gentlemen, a giant of his profession, Roone Arledge. And now to the top of the list. Perhaps no other athlete bridges 40 years of Sports Illustrated better than Muhammad Ali. Ali fought professionally for more than 20 years, from 1960 to 81, and his life was by turns so fabulously brassy and daring, so filled with assorted wonders and adventure, and so enlarged by the magic of his personality and the play of his mind that nothing even remotely like the man had ever been seen on the sporting scene. The three-time heavyweight champion of the world was Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year in 1974. He's appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated a record 33 times, including the cover of this week's 40th anniversary issue. Dancer, poet, fighter, provocateur. He was the most gifted and unforgettable athlete performer of his, or perhaps any other time. "I'm bigger than boxing," he used to say, and he was, and still is. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali. 40 years ago, our 40 for the ages had yet to make their mark on the world of sports, and appearing on the cover of Sports Illustrated was a pinnacle or a jinx that didn't yet exist. Today, young athletes everywhere still strive to make their faces stand out from the crowd. They're the legends of tomorrow, and their stories are unfolding on the pages of Sports Illustrated right now.
As long as there is someone somewhere on the verge of doing something brilliant, Sports Illustrated will be there to tell the stories of sport in the boldest, most vivid and powerful strokes of words and pictures. Thank you, Bob, for your insights and your recollections, and thank all of you for sharing this evening with us. It's been a wonderful night, and we hope the next 40 years will be something to behold. Good night, everybody.